Ambassador Zethkar of the Hegemony Council clicked his mandibles in what passed for amusement among his people. Across the crystalline conference table, the human representative, a small, unremarkable female named Sarah Chen, sat quietly reviewing her notes. The other ambassadors whispered among themselves, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of dismissal. "The motion before us," Zethkar announced, his voice resonating through the chamber's translation matrix, "is humanity's petition for inclusion in the Galactic Leadership Consortium. As we all know, leadership requires certain prerequisites. The Vorthan delegate, a towering being of pure energy contained within a shimmering field, pulsed with what their species considered laughter. Humans lack the cognitive processing power of the Andromedans, the entity stated. They cannot interface with quantum probability matrices like the Nexari. They possess neither the 1,000-year lifespans of the Eternal Ones, nor the collective consciousness of the hive minds." Chen looked up from her notes, her brown eyes meeting each delegate in turn. "You're absolutely right," she said simply. The chamber fell silent. Even the perpetually humming resonance singers stopped their harmonic undertones. "We can't compute 1,000,000 variables simultaneously," Chen continued, standing slowly. "We don't live for millennia, and we certainly can't share consciousness. We're just human." The Nexari delegate's crystalline form shifted colors, a display of confusion. "Then why do you seek to lead?" Chen smiled, and something in that expression made several delegates lean forward despite themselves. "Let me tell you about the Kepler Station incident. 3 months earlier, Kepler Station had been humanity's most ambitious project, a joint research facility at the edge of explored space, housing scientists from 17 different species. When the quantum storm hit, it should have been a simple evacuation protocol. The Andromedans calculated the optimal evacuation sequence in 0.3 seconds, Chen said. Perfectly efficient, logical. It would have saved 94.7% of the station's population. She paused, letting the implications sink in. But the Andromedans' calculations didn't account for junior researcher Vixta, a young Catherian whose mobility pod had malfunctioned in Sector 7. The system wrote him off as an acceptable loss. When human engineer Marcus Rodriguez saw this, he did something the computers called irrational. The Catherian delegates' tentacles twitched, their species equivalent of rapt attention. Rodriguez abandoned his assigned evacuation pod and ran toward Sector 7. Even though the storm was already destabilizing that section, the Andromedans recalculated. His action would lower overall survival probability to 91.2%. They ordered him to stop. Chen's voice grew quieter, but somehow carried further. Marcus didn't stop. He reached Vixta, jury-rigged a personal atmospheric bubble using nothing but emergency kit components and what you'd probably call human stubbornness, and carried him to safety. The rescue took 17 minutes. 17 minutes that the most advanced computers in the galaxy said would doom them both. What happened? The question came from the normally silent voidwalkers, beings who rarely showed interest in physical, realm affairs. They both survived. Not only that, but Marcus's improvised route became the new evacuation standard when 3 more systems failed sequentially. His irrational path turned out to be the only viable exit when the primary corridors collapsed. The final survival rate was 99.8%. 1 person was lost, someone who chose to stay behind to manually seal a reactor breach. The chamber had grown completely still. The Hegemony's analysis praised the Andromedans' logical framework and the Nexari's quantum calculations, Chen continued. But every single survivor credited their escape to the unreasonable human who refused to abandon someone the computers had written off. Zethkar's mandibles stopped clicking. "You're saying humans lead through irrationality?" "Not irrationality," Chen corrected. "We lead through something your species seem to have optimized out of yourselves over millennia of evolution. We lead through hope." She gestured to her tablet, displaying footage from across the galaxy. When the Catherian homeworld faced the plague of 2387, It was human medical volunteers who stayed after every other species evacuated. When the Nexari faced the logic virus that corrupted their quantum networks, it was human programmers who thought illogically enough to find solutions your perfect systems couldn't compute. The images shifted, humans working alongside aliens, always seeming small and fragile next to their cosmic neighbors, yet somehow always at the center of the action. When the Vorthon energy forms were trapped in that pocket dimension, your own kind said rescue was impossible. Humans said let's try anyway. When the Eternal Ones faced their first civil war in 50,000 years, they came to the youngest species in the galaxy for mediation. Chen's voice grew strong, filling the vast chamber. You're right, we can't outthink the Andromedans or outlive the Eternal Ones. We can't share consciousness like the hive minds or manipulate quantum probability like the Nexari, but we have something else. Which is? Zethkar asked, though his tone had lost its earlier dismissiveness. We refuse to accept that anything is impossible. We look at a 5.3% chance of success and say, so you're telling me there's a chance. We see someone who's been written off by every logical system and say, not on our watch. We face the heat death of the universe and start planning for what comes after. The silence stretched until the Eternal One's representative, Ancient Beyond, Measure spoke in a voice like distant stars. The young species makes a compelling argument. Chen shook her head. I'm not arguing, I'm simply stating a fact that you've all already acknowledged through your actions. When each of your species faces its darkest hour, when logic fails, when calculation isn't enough, when the impossible needs to become possible, you call humans. She gestured around the chamber. This consortium has existed for 3,000 years. In that time, how many crises have been resolved by pure logic? How many by perfect calculation? And how many by someone saying, this is wrong, and refusing to accept the unacceptable? The delegates looked at each other, then back at the small human who had somehow made them feel like students in her classroom. The galaxy doesn't need leaders who can compute the best outcome, Chen concluded. You already have those. You need leaders who refuse to accept that the best possible outcome is good enough. You need leaders who will look at a 99.9% success rate and ask about the 0.1% who get left behind. She sat down, her presentation complete. The vote was unanimous. 3 years later, as the human coalition coordinated the largest rescue operation in galactic history, saving an entire solar system that every computer model said was doomed, Ambassador Zethkar clicked his mandibles in what was no longer amusement, but admiration. Sometimes, the galaxy learned, the most logical choice was to follow the species that refused to be logical.